Hello Animorphs fans, and welcome back to the Animorphs universe. I'm going to do something that somehow I've not yet done on this channel. I'm going to review every episode of the Animorphs TV series. And you may say, haven't you done that before? What I've done before is watched it whilst drinking, in a drinking game, you know, let's have a laugh at the TV series sort of thing. This is going to be different in that I'm actually going to go through the episode bit by bit and pull it apart and give it a proper good review. If you've ever seen any of my reviews before, you know that I can be a nitpicky sod, so expect a lot of that. Disclaimer, I've grown fond of the TV series, and so no matter what I say throughout this, it does hold a soft spot in my heart. So yeah, just be aware, it will get a bit snappy sometimes, potentially. But that's just my style, that's how I do things. The Animorphs TV series came around the turn of the century after the books had grown popular enough that Nickelodeon decided to take up this show, and it was made in Canada of all places, so forgive the Canadian accents that pop up quite frequently in this show. Unfortunately, the series only lasted 2 seasons. You could argue 1 and a bit, because there's only 6 episodes in the 2nd season. But actually it wasn't low ratings that ended the Animorphs TV series, rather it was the budget. And considering that if they went any further with producing the TV series, they would have to increase wages, that was the thing that eventually killed the Animorphs series. Of course, if you look at statistics, Animorphs was one of the most popular Nickelodeon shows in at least 2 of the American states. In fact, in 2 American states, it was the most popular, according to people who did the poll. So it's not like we can blame bad ratings necessarily for the end of the Animorphs TV series. We can largely blame the lack of budget. And as we go through this, we will see exactly where the low budget had its definite effect on the quality of the show. But anyway, enough of that. Let's actually dip our toes into the wacky world of the Animorphs TV series.
My name is Jake. Half an hour ago, I was just a regular kid.
Not even 5 seconds into the show and we have our first major issue. Now this issue doesn't become apparent until just a little bit later on, but keep in mind when he says, half an hour ago I was just a normal kid, and look at the time of day it is outside. So, what time of day, or what would it look like out there half an hour before this particular scene? Have a think about it. We then immediately get transported into Siberia for the first proper scene of the Animorphs TV series, and it's a full minute of looking at them playing games before anything actually happens. It seems like they tried to extend this scene watching Tobias play a game, watching them fail the level. It just seems like they're trying to stretch the episode out using this particular scene. This is where they thought we need to just lengthen it a little bit just so we meet the right amount of time. It was this scene that they did that in. We then have Cassie and Rachel entering Siberia, which is this arcade where the Animorphs do spend a lot of their time, and it's made quite clear that they don't know Tobias.
Oh, hi. Hey guys.
You just got blown away.
It is strange as well that Tobias just saunters off, and as we'll see in a minute, he does something very strange, but we're introduced to him as him just playing this game, losing, and then walking off in a complete grouch. So we're introduced to the 2 ladies of the show, Cassie and Rachel. Now, unfortunately with the TV series, their characters weren't very translatable to the screen, at least with the budget restrictions we have. It won't be quite apparent yet, but as we go into this series, you'll notice that Cassie and Rachel are basically interchangeable. They become Cassachely. That's what we'll call them. Cassachely. And in this first scene, we see that, well, Cassie doesn't even have any lines. Rachel delivers all the lines, and Cassie walks along behind her like she's just a shadow creature. Rachel then asks the 2 blokes a question, Jake and Marco. It's a pretty simple question.
So, what have you been doing?
Marco then proceeds to shush her, and she never gets an answer to the question she gave. They just completely fob her off.
So, what have you been doing, Galactic Warrior?
Some great characterization going on, everyone. This is where the weird things start to happen, because the arcade games start to fizzle. All the static comes up like the game is breaking. And not only that, but Homer, Jake's dog, starts barking and rushes out of Siberia in an absolute... He's determined, he's going someplace special. Homer leads our 4 troubadours down the street towards the construction site, where, of course, if you've read the books, you know that we meet Elfangor, the alien. But remember, at the start of this show, Jake says, half an hour ago I was just a normal kid. Well, if we look at where they're running, we see that they've artificially made it look like it's evening. It's quite clear that it's the middle of the day. Look at the shadows on the ground. The sun is basically directly above them, and yet we're made to believe that this is the evening. We come across Tobias, who's skulking around, and this might actually be evening, judging by the length of his shadow. As the introductory credits roll on the screen, we see Homer lead the Animorphs further down the road and toward the construction site. And in between clips of this, we have clips of Tobias skulking around, also heading to the construction site, making it seem quite obvious to the audience that they're both being drawn to something. This is unusual because it doesn't happen in the books this way. In the books, Tobias hangs around with Jake and Marco because Tobias was bullied at school and Jake was the only one who fought for him, so Tobias sort of clings on to him. And they all just decide to go through the construction site because they want to take a shortcut home. That doesn't happen in this show. Instead, we have this thing where the Animorphs are chasing Homer, and Tobias just so happens, even though he came from the Siberia where the Animorphs already were, they converge, they separate and converge, meet up at the construction site at the same time, as if they've both taken different pathways to the construction site. We then get a fade to black, and once the screen comes back, it's nighttime. So we can only assume that the Animorphs have been there for at least an hour, judging by the change of light. We then get this bizarre image of Tobias and Homer standing side by side in this construction site, looking like something out of the Children of the Corn. How long they've been stood there? Probably for the entire duration that... Or maybe not, because they're out in the open, but somehow they're both standing here like this. It's very bizarre. It doesn't happen in the books like this, and it makes you believe that there's something going on that the show never actually touches on later down the line. You could argue that it's because Tobias is there because he's part Andalite, and further down the road we will see that he is Prince Elfangor's son. Spoiler. Should have said that before. But if that was the case, then why is Homer also drawn? Remember, they've both been drawn at the same time. Tobias and Homer, same time, got suddenly, whoop, we've got to go to this exact spot. The show could have done something spectacular here, and I tell you what they could have done, and maybe this was the plan all along, although I doubt it was. Dogs in the Animorphs books are part Pemelite. The creators of the Chi, who we do see in the Animorphs TV series, the Pemelite's soul, what their essence was placed into domesticated dogs. Who created the Pemelites? The Ellimist. What did the Ellimist also create? The Time Matrix. Something else we don't see in the TV series, but we see in the books. Where was the Time Matrix hidden? The construction site. Who hid the Time Matrix? Who is now about to arrive at the construction site? Elfangor, Tobias's father. So there are connections there. And all the TV series had to do was eventually, down the line, make that connection. And this initial scene could have been turned into something, it could have turned out to be something brilliant. Oh, why are Homer and Tobias standing there like this? That could have been an absolute masterstroke. But unfortunately, they didn't do it. It's sad, really. But if you want, you can turn it into your headcanon. That's what I might do. I might say the headcanon is, because of the Pemelite essence in Homer, because of Tobias' connection to Elfangor and hence indirectly the Time Matrix, and of course Homer's connection to the Time Matrix because of his Pemelite essence, Because of Elfangor's arrival, it just somehow drew everything to that part, and that's why Tobias and Home are both zipped there. So I'm going to connect the dots for you, TV show, and say that because of that, you've done a brilliant job. Well done. There's also one line here that's almost hidden that I think also is different from the books. Rachel walks up to Tobias and says,
You're new around here, right?
that's not how it goes in the books. Tobias is not a new kid in the books. He is a bully magnet in the books. In the series, it seems to be that he's just a mysterious new kid who sort of skulks around in his leather jacket trying to look cool. This is the first example of a problem that we've got with Tobias's character. They missed the mark, the TV series, with Tobias's character, I feel. And this is the first example of it, because the whole point of Tobias is that he lives a pretty rubbish life. The first thing we learn about Tobias is that he gets bullied a lot in school, and it's only Jake that sticks up for him, which is why he hangs out with the Animorphs in the first place. The TV series actually turns him more into David, who is constantly moving around school, so Tobias is apparently new to this school, as Rachel thinks, unless she's just that shallow that she's never noticed him before. This is just the first in a line of examples where Tobias's character arc is taken from him for whatever reason, be it budget or bad direction. In this specific case, I'm going to say that it's bad direction. The writers failed Tobias, and we'll see examples of how. So having waited in the construction site for about an hour, apparently just twiddling his thumbs, Tobias spots Elfangor's ship descending from the sky, crash landing, and crash land it does. Something that again they changed from the original books, because in those it just landed quite gracefully. It hovered above the ground and came to a gentle stop. In this one we get something a bit more dramatic. Although of course with low budget it's entirely off screen.
I don't think so.
What if someone's hurt?
She's right.
I'm in.
The one character who seems to be excelling in this episode is most definitely Boris Cabrera, whose main attributes are all summed up quite neatly in the space of this 20-minute episode. Unlike pretty much all the other characters who aren't really developed in this first episode.
I'm in.
Huh? You're insane. Wait up.
Marco gets out some hit or miss jokes. Some of them do hit quite well. Some of them miss, but it is the 90s after all, and it's Nickelodeon, so what do you expect? Not only that, but it's topped up with the fact that Boris Cabrera is genuinely a good actor, and he does a superb job throughout the Animorphs TV series. He and Shawn Ashmore are definitely the best of the bunch. There's very little we see of the aliens in this series, and this is a prime example. Elfangor is basically little more than the silhouette they use for Visser 3, and occasionally you get eye shots, and they change the eye colours from red to green. That's all we ever really see of Elfangor. And the problem here is budget, of course. I'm sure if they had more money, they'd put more effort into the models and costumes. So you can't really blame the TV series for the lack of decent quality aliens. Something that we all agree is a thing. The aliens do look pretty awful, and they completely disregard the Taxons, which are another alien race in the TV series. But it's not the TV show's fault. You can only do so much with so much money, and these were before the days of easy CGI. A lot of Animorphs fans would say it should have been animated, but what costs more money? A couple of dodgy costumes or animators? I think we both know the answer there. Again, not the TV show's fault. We can't blame the TV series for this. They did the best with what they had. What I will say, however, is that I find it very strange that Elfangor's moans and groans and guffaws end up in the soundtrack for this. Remember that the Andalites speak telepathically. I don't think they'd be exclaiming their grumbles and mumbles all the time. Just one of those little details that I think is glossed over, and it's just made to seem more dramatic, which personally I don't approve of. Maybe you do, I don't. The Animorphs are hidden behind an obstacle to hide from the Andalite, but once it becomes clear that this Andalite is injured and doesn't seem to pose a threat, then it's the two girls of the group, Cassachely, who rise to the challenge. This is different from the book series because it is Tobias, again, who takes the first steps here. He is the one most interested in the alien spaceship. And you'd also think that in the TV series it would be the same as well, because wasn't Tobias the one drawn to the construction site in the first place? Wouldn't it make sense for him to be the first one to stand up? Why would he hide with the other Animorphs? If it seems the whole purpose of him being there was him being drawn to this thing. Not only that, but the whole point of Tobias' arc at the start is he's the first to jump into these things, and we'll get into why later on, because it becomes relevant again. But of course the TV series had to have, well, it's the 90s, isn't it? So it's woman power. And it's the two women, Cassachely, who rise to the challenge against the cowardly men who sit around and have to be dragged out. But this is a weird juxtaposition with the 90s girl power thing, because as much as they're strong and they're very brave, they've basically got no personality. Cassachely basically mirror each other here. They even stand up at the same time, and Cassie looks over to Rachel to make sure she's doing the same thing. The book series did Cassie and Rachel brilliantly, especially Cassie after book 9 when she finally seemed to get introduced properly. They were full of character and complete extreme opposites, but the TV series treats them both as girl power and nothing more. Rachel was the true definition of girl power in the book series, and it was done brilliantly. That's how you do it, TV show. We then get one of the best lines, or probably the best line of the first episode, and of course it's Boris Cabrera's delivery.
Oh, sure. The dog gets this thing.
A lot of people were concerned when there were rumours going around that Animorphs, the movie, would end up being a comedy. But in a lot of ways the TV show was a comedy as well, and it was lines like this that actually made it work. A lot of the times the Animorphs TV series was quite funny, and if they can do this sort of comedy again in an Animorphs movie, bring Boris Cabrera back, for God's sake. He was brilliant, and he's really good with his delivery as well. After another couple of quips from Marco, we'd suddenly start to see who the better actors are of the main group. Now, to be fair, all the actors are pretty good on the whole. Some better than others, and I think this is a prime example of it here. Look at the reactions between Marco and Tobias, and tell me who you think pulls off the better reaction.
I heard it, but I didn't hear it.
I heard it. In my head.
We then get another classic Rachel line, and it's one thing that I've noticed in this first episode, that most of Rachel's lines are completely redundant to anything that's going on.
It's gonna be okay. Cassie knows a lot about animals.
Way to insult the guy, Rach.
And this is the one time that one of the other Animorphs calls her out on it. I don't think this is a trend that continues through the series, but yeah, everything that Rachel says in this episode is just sort of shrugged off by the other characters and not even responded to, or it's just generally so bafflingly stupid that somebody has to turn around and shove her back in her place. We then get our exposition dump that we do, to be fair, get in the book series, and it's done quite well here. And they make it quite obvious that Elfangor is using some sort of telepathic image projection as he raises hands towards the Animorph. And we have to forgive the animation that the TV series has used, because remember, budget and 90s. But for what it's worth, it does a pretty good job here, and I think this whole scene with Elfangor was done pretty well and aligns with the books pretty smoothly. Of course, Elfangor then delivers to the Animorphs, out of seemingly nowhere, the Escafil device, the blue box, the item, or MacGuffin, that gives the Animorphs the power to morph animals. And I like the detail that it turns orange when they touch it, something that didn't happen in the books. Again, it's one of those things that the TV show used a bit of imagination and added to the lore of the series in a way that didn't offend, didn't add much, but gave it its own little twist, which I approve of. Marco refuses to touch the blue box in quite a humorous manner, and then Rachel tells them that they have to do it. Remember that It was basically Tobias filling this role in the books as part of his main character. Once again, Tobias is at the back saying very little and doing very little. To be fair to the series, it is doing Rachel's character a little bit of justice, and we don't see much more of this type of Rachel throughout the series. She's she becomes Cass Hatchley, of course. She just becomes the token female. So it's nice to see this change, but it does take away from Tobias's arc, which is important. It's then revealed that Elfangor knows Tobias's name when he is the most reluctant to touch the blue box, as opposed to the book series where he was most definitely the first. This is something that will become more relevant later on in the series, when we figure out why Elfangor knows Tobias's name. Of course, I believe I've already spoiled that in this video, so I might as well tell you now. Elfangor is Tobias's father, and he recognises him. We hold on this awkward scene for a good 20 seconds or so of them just touching the cube and nothing happening, but eventually they do get the power to morph. All the while, Homer is in the background barking at something, and then he turns his head and sees the blade ship arriving in the distance. Elfangor proceeds to explain the morphing power to the Animorphs. Essentially, they have the power to morph into any animal that they can acquire the DNA of. This is where the Animorphs learn about their powers and sets them off on their journey to fight against the Yeerks, who, of course, are just about to land. Elfangor also gives a warning, though, that if you stay in morph for more than 2 Earth hours, you end up trapped in that morph. The blade ship then lands, and I've got to say, the animators did a pretty good job of doing the blade ship. Even though it's shrouded in darkness and shadow for most of the time, it definitely resembles what a blade ship should look like. A giant penis. At this point, Elfangor is panicking. The Visser is coming down, and he's going to destroy the humans if he sees them. So Elfangor shoos them away. But then he changes his mind and calls Tobias back, because Elfangor is the ultimate MacGuffin dispenser, and from somewhere picks up this disc. But he says, Tobias, take this. And so, yeah, he's called Tobias away, and then he calls him back, and then he throws the disc past him, and Tobias loses it. Honestly, why didn't he just give it to him then? Like, as soon as he points out, he finishes with the blue box. Where did that go, by the way? Why doesn't he just say, Tobias, yeah, also this? Rather than wait for Tobias to be halfway across the construction site to call him, Tobias runs back, and then Elfangor then launches the disc past him. Also, by the way, Andalites don't know what throwing is, apparently.
Now, this probably isn't the time to ask, but you can throw, can't you? Good.
Marco,
Yeah.
what is throw?
So yeah, there's that little inconsistency. We then get nominee for the corniest line of the TV series.
Tobias! Go at this, Tobias, with your heart and your soul.
Really doesn't feel like it belongs. It feels more like it belongs in Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or something more in the fantasy realm, not sci-fi. The exact same Andalite model, but mirrored this time, appears, and it's Visser 3. Oh no! Visser 3 shows up, and while I was researching this episode, I thought to myself, when we do eventually get an Animorphs movie, I would love to see him being played by Pam Ferris. I mean, I know Pam Ferris is a female, but this is Yeerks we're talking about. They aren't quite the same when it comes to... Basically, I'd be happy for Visser 3 to be in a female human morph when it comes to that. And I think if he does Miss Trunchbull lines, I think that would be a perfect comedy Animorphs Visser 3. We then find out that apparently Elfangor didn't already know that Visser 3 had taken an Andalite host body. If the TV series had eventually gotten on to do the Andalite Chronicles, which I mean, what would the odds of that have been? But if they had eventually gotten to that, then this would have caused a few problems, considering that Elfangor was there when Visser 3 took an Andalite body. He was there. He was there, guys. The TV series almost makes it feel as if Visser 3 has only just taken an Andalite host body. To be fair, so far as the 26 episodes of the series are concerned, this is largely irrelevant. Only if you read the book series does it feel a bit weird. Visser 3 adds more exposition and tells Elfangor what his plans are, and his plans are to take control of Earth. He'll have billions of hosts to add to the Yeerk Empire, and he does it all while cackling and twirling his proverbial mustache. He then kills Elfangor, eating him alive in his monster morph that we only see via an arm and quite a good shadow, to be fair. Although I'm pretty sure it's just a man in a costume. Either that or really basic CGI. But either way, it's a budgetary problem. We were never going to get a massive bugger off morph on the screen. We were restricted to various body parts and shadows. Can't blame the show for that, and it has the same effect. Elfangor is dead, and it's the Animorphs all on their own.
You just got blown away.
The Animorphs scatter, and they then get chased by human controllers, and they unleash the single Hawk-Bajir. If you read the book series, you know that this blade ship was filled with Hawk-Bajir and Taxxons, and there were aliens everywhere. And they had big Dracon beams, they were big, intimidating. But no, in the TV series, a bunch of fumbling, bumbling human controllers who look like they've just come out of the local bowling alley, and one single Hawk-Bajir. Probably even worse than the Andalite costume. It's a bloke in a Godzilla uniform, apparently, with a goblin mask on. Cassie then trips and falls in a very cliche manner into a tangle of cables, and for whatever reason it takes her so long to get out that Jake has to provide a distraction and lure this single Hawk-Bajir away. May I also point out that the Hawk-Bajir make exactly the same noise as Elfangor's ship, just pitched differently. We then get the epic chase scene where Jake leads the Hawk-Bajir away from Cassie as she's somehow gotten infinitely stuck into these cables. The budgetary issues mean that for the Hawk-Bajir's point of view, we just have the screen look a bit wibbly wobbly, and we watch as this Hawk-Bajir chases Jake. He even gets up close to Jake to the point where he reaches and scratches Jake across the back, tearing his shirt in the process. Mere seconds later, Jake has completely lost the Hawk-Bajir and finds a pipe in which he hides. This can be explained in that Hawk-Bajir have very bad eyesight, which is true to the books, but that's never actually explained in the TV series. It looks like this Hawk-Bajir has found Jake, scratched him, and then just... you know, he's not a fit Bajir, basically. Been neglecting the gym for a bit too long, this one. It would have been helpful as well if the point of view of the Hawk-Bajir was maybe darkened a bit, or maybe changed so it doesn't look like the Hawk-Bajir can just see Jake quite clearly in the dark. It just makes it make less sense. But either way, Jake escapes the Hawk-Bajir and ends up in this pipe. We then discover why it was necessary for Homer to be drawn to the construction site in the first place, whereas he wasn't in the books, because Jake is going to morph Homer in this pipe in order to escape the Hawk-Bajir and the fumbling, bumbling human controllers. This is one of the best morph sequence of the TV series, and to be fair, for 90 standards, it's pretty good. It's just a shame that it shouldn't have been Jake to be the first to morph. That was Tobias's thing. Yet again, there was a reason for it being Tobias being the first. There's one person amongst these fumbling, bumbling human controllers who we are bound to recognise, and Jake sees him while he's in this pipe. It turns out that it's the principal of their school. Of course, in the books, he's vice principal or assistant principal, depending on which book you read. But in the TV series, he is Principal Hedrick Chapman. And he is recognisable by his distinctive shoes. The problem here is that the TV series makes it look like it's the way he scratches his own legs that makes him distinctive, when if you look at the later scene in the cafeteria, he's got gold toe caps on his shoes, very distinctive, and you'd think that that was the thing that tipped Jake off to the fact that this is Chapman. But yeah, the way it's shot from the pipe, it's almost as if the way he scratches his leg is the way that Jake recognises him, which I always thought was the case. But upon researching this, I saw, oh wait, his shoes are really distinctive. Maybe that's what they were going for. Maybe it's a combination of both. I mean, who else with those sorts of shoes scratches their legs like that, to be fair? Maybe they just thought, oh, it's got to be so bleeding obvious, so it's got to be a combination of shoes and the way he scratches his leg. Nobody's going to mistake him then. Fair enough. There's also the way at the end that he puts his finger in his ear. That's also a giveaway, apparently, as we all see as we go through this series, but whatever. There's also the problem here that was also in the books. The Yeerks have just emerged from a space battle. That's why the Blade Ship is there, that's why Elfangor is there. They've just come from a battle in Earth's orbit. Why is the principal of the school in a space battle? I thought the whole point of the controllers was that they'd lead normal lives, you know, up to a point. They'd just be disguised as these humans and do normal everyday things. Whereas both the book and the TV series seem to imply that Chapman was up in a space dogfight in the Blade Ship, which doesn't quite jive with his life as, well, in the book, he did everything, to be fair. Come across a controller doing some weird task that seems completely arbitrary and out of place, it's going to be Chapman. Whether it's taming buffaloes, capturing Animorphs along with subvisors in an underground cave, assassinating the parents of other controllers. Yeah, basically, whatever, it's always Chapman. So, fair. Of course, it would be Chapman fighting battles in the Blade Ship, as well as all the other people who look like they've just come out of the recreation centre. Jake runs off, now as Homer, with Homer, and they leave the construction site, escaping the Yeerks for tonight. The other Animorphs, we can only just assume, have also gotten away unscathed. And that's it for the construction site scene. How does it compare to the books? It's relatively close, and the changes they did make, some were hit, some were miss. I'm not going to complain too much. I think for the large part, this was done pretty well. But this isn't the end of the episode. There's a bit more to go. The next day, we're in the cafeteria at the school. This isn't what happens in the books. I think the reason that they do this is because they know that because of budgetary reasons, most of the action, most of the set pieces, most of the plot lines are going to revolve around the school. Because the TV series is very small in scope in comparison to the books, where they go everywhere from the North Pole to the city of Atlantis, effectively, to other planets entirely. Whereas in the TV series, basically every plot happens in the school. Not everyone, but a good number of them. In the book series, hardly any of the plots happen in the school. The school is just something where they'll occasionally meet up in like the first third of the book to have a bit of a natter about something, and then they'll go to the jungle somewhere and have a mission there. But no, not in the TV series. But that's a budgetary thing, once again. Not the TV... Well, yeah, to be fair, the TV series could have tried harder, but I think it was a lot harder for them to really vary it up. But we're setting the scene here for the Animorphs always being in the school. Of course, the day after all these events, the Animorphs meet up there. But it becomes obvious as we listen to them speaking that Jake has not yet been seen. And yet they don't act any different. They act as if it's not a problem. In fact, this is where Rachel gives another one of her really silly lines. She says,
He's smart. He'll show up.
That's right, Rachel. Last you saw, he was being chased down by a big bladed lizard alien, but it's all right because he can do maths. What a silly thing to say. Oh, we shouldn't even bother looking for him. You know, he's a smart kid, no matter what. A frickin' Tyrannosaurus Rex could be chasing him down. It's all right. He's got his wits about him. No, Rachel, you blithering, blundering, buggering fool. We also get this really stupid part, and who'd have thunked it? It's Rachel again. The cafeteria is a nice quiet setting apparently, and the Animorphs are sitting pretty close to one edge of this hall, and Tobias emerges at the other end, and up steps Rachel. Oi, Tobias, over here!
Hey, Tobias.
Okay.
Considering that yesterday you didn't even know him, you thought he was the new kid, so now you're making it clear that you know this person in front of the entire school. Well done, Rachel. Big round of frickin' applause. The Animorphs, without Jake at that point, then proceed to talk about the night before. Then Jake shows up, but not after Cassie mumbles something.
I thought that thing got him.
It's mumble mumble, thing got him. And she's almost smirking while she's saying it, as if she wished that Jake had perished during the night. And then when he finally does appear, she looks absolutely bewildered, like she's been caught saying something she shouldn't have. And then when he says it hadn't got him, she's got that look on her face which is almost like a smile trying to cover up a frown. You know, that sort of face, that sort of thing. Cassie didn't want Jake to survive this, apparently. Damn it, he survived.
My plan has been foiled again.
Jake then tells the other Animorphs that it's real because he morphed his dog Homer in the pipe in order to get away from the Yerks. And this is where the Animorphs decide, so it must actually be real. And the thing about them being in the cafeteria, not only does it set the school as like the battleground, it gives that sense of tension because then they're looking around thinking any one of these people could be one of these controllers. And it does add that little bit of tension despite the fact that they're all kids and they're all just sort of pushing each other through these hallways. And it doesn't seem quite that intimidating. Chapman then appears, of course, and we see that distinctive set of boots and the even more distinctive scratching of the leg. And that's where Jake tells the other Animorphs that Principal Chapman is a controller, and they just believe him straight off without him explaining why he knows. But I imagine that happens after scene cuts. Speaking of scene cuts, there are plenty of scene cuts here, and it gives you a bloody headache. The rate at which it chops and changes between each character is frankly dizzying and doesn't help give any sense of perspective at all. It just confuses. It needed more settled shots, I think, where it just hangs for a few extra seconds just to let you just reset your perspective, and then it can move through a few reaction shots and then cut away again. It doesn't quite fit the scene that they're in. They're in a really quiet scene where not much is going on, and it's cutting left, right, centre all the time. It doesn't match, as far as I'm concerned. The episode then comes to an end, and that was My Name is Jake, Part 1 of the Animorphs TV series. The big problem with this episode is what it does with Tobias. Because Tobias was meant to be the first person to touch the blue box. Tobias was the first person to have gone to Elfangor. It does this weird thing where both he and Homer are drawn to the site, but that's never explained, and then he just continues to act the most reluctant despite being drawn there in the first place, which is strange. But the worst part of this episode was the fact that Tobias wasn't the first to morph, which was essential to his character, so far as I'm concerned. Because Tobias's character arc in the books is that his life is so miserable and he's so dissatisfied with the way he's living that he jumps onto anything that he sees as a way out of it. Absolutely anything. That's why he was the first to morph, because he thought, great, this is the change that I needed in my life. It's why in Megamorphs Book 4 Back to Before, when they change history so that they never meet Elfangor, he eventually joins the sharing because it's a way out of his normal life. Tobias is your typical unfortunate, gullible cult member who buys into the first thing that makes life seem that little bit different. And the TV series has robbed him of those character traits here. Tobias is meant to be the one who jumps to Elfangor first, the one who's immediately, this is great guys, we can change into animals. The scene where we see the first morph in the books is in Jake's bedroom. Tobias comes around, knocks on his door and says, I did it, and shows Jake, and he's all excited about it because it means something to him. It means he can get away from the life that he's currently living. The life of being a bully magnet at school, not really having parents who care about him. Again, this is taken away from Tobias, who's just now the new kid who acts a bit odd, which isn't Tobias's character. It also means that when we come down to Tobias becoming a Nothlit, spoiler alert, in the next coming episodes, it doesn't make as much sense as it does in the books, where we know from book 43 that it was pretty much a deliberate decision on his part, which makes sense with his character, where he's given this opportunity to basically change his life, and he takes it at first opportunity. That's why he became a Nothlit so early in the series. That's all part of his character. The TV series doesn't have this, and it's a major part of Tobias's arc. So it's failed Tobias. It also doesn't establish the other characters very well, but at least with, well, apart from maybe Rachel, who's apparently the stupid one of the group, but I don't think that lasts. Yeah, Rachel's the dumb one of the group. And apart from that, to be fair, it doesn't have much time to develop these other characters, but it has ripped a major character aspect away from Tobias, which I think is extremely detrimental. Apart from that, this episode was largely fine. A few of the changes were reasonable and understandable because of the budget restrictions. Some of the changes can be explained if you just, use the lore of the series, like Homer and Tobias being drawn to the construction site. If you connect the dots, that's actually a really good adaptation. I don't think it was intended, but I'm going to pretend that it was. Because it makes it better in my head, it makes it work better, and I like it. But you can just tell that there were budget problems, and that's what eventually led to the downfall of the series. But overall, I reckon it's a relatively strong start considering what resources they had. So that was My Name is Jake Part 1. Tune in next time for My Name is Jake Part 2, where we'll see what comes next. Remember to like and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. Remember that we've got an Animorphs Discord link in the description. Become a member of the channel for exclusive content and early content as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you somewhere else in the Animorphs universe. Ta-ra!
You just got blown away.